Welcome to Monuments. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Ever since its removal from this position of prominence in our capital city, Barbadians have been making suggestions as to what could possibly be erected on the base left vacant, and what a redesigned National Hero Square could possibly look like. On the International Day for the Family, May the 15th, the government of Barbados launched a competition and invited the submission of designs for a monument as a tribute to the Barbadian family. On October the 17th, 3 finalists were chosen. And just 1 month later, on Friday, November the 18th, the finalists made their final presentations before the judges. The winner is expected to be announced on Friday, the 25th of November. On this occasion, we are giving you the opportunity to experience what is being proposed. The 3 finalists will detail their concept and their design. We begin with Vincent Jones. He contextualized the space.
In terms of the design, we were looking for something that does justice to the space. The space that has been allocated for the erection of this new monument is that location where Nelson's statue was previously located, and it falls between where Nelson's column was and the large circle where you have the Remembrance Day parade. So that gives you some reference point in terms of what's in town right now. We needed to take into consideration the historical context of that space, not only in the brief that the design competition has asked for, but also to be cognizant and respectful of what the space has been over different generations. So if we go right back to the early 17th century, you would have had slaves being landed in that location and auctioned. It was the location where you had the cage, where slaves that had ran away were caught and imprisoned there until the owners came for them. So that is a pretty tragic past, but all the same a past that you cannot ignore. It is also the location, as we know, where Nelson's statue was for over 200 years. The Barbadians that erected it then didn't have an issue with it, but obviously the Barbadians that erected it then were perhaps the same ones that would have been involved in the slave trade and so on. So it became a challenge for us as we developed as a nation. Also in that space you have, it would have been at one point in time Trafalgar Square, later to be renamed, I believe, Parliament Square, later to be renamed Hero Square. So we had to take into account those transitions as well, that the square is not only going to be designated for the celebration of the family, but also it is a part of Hero Square. And then finally the design brief called for a celebration of the Barbadian family. So it's to take those concepts, to pay homage to them, and to produce something that pays homage to them but meets the design criteria at the same time.
We wanted to be able to put those 3 major aspects together. The idea of the slave history, the history it has with slavery, the idea of it being called National Hero Square, as well as telling the story of the Barbadian family. So with that in mind, we started to explore different ideas and ways of how we can portray this journey, or how we could tell this story. And in that we thought about getting different symbols, or coming up with different symbols that could represent those different aspects of that journey.
So in terms of evolving our design, we would have played around with a lot of concepts. We would have looked at some of the concepts basically from our African ancestors. We started there, looking at symbolism from Adinkra symbols, which are the way the Africans would have written and communicated before. And we started to to explore the various design concepts that we thought could work.
So the shackles is a usually a very indicative symbol of the idea of slavery and of oppression. So we use that idea of the shackles to represent that.
These, at both ends, these semicircular elements, these are what we have represented the shackles as. Pulling those shackles apart is a representation of the Barbadian family. You have what could be perceived as a male, female, and a child, but the images are nondescript to take account of the changing concept of what the family is. Okay?
But the original, our ancestral Bajan families would have been instrumental in getting or making a way for us through their breaking of those shackles, breaking of those chains, and providing a way then for our Barbadian family, the modern Barbadian family, to rise and to thrive and to be what it is now today. And from that, we then recognize that the Barbadian family is instrumental in producing all of our heroes, including our national heroes.
In the middle, you have what we call stele, which each one of those will represent one of the current national heroes that we have. However, the space is large enough that if there are more national heroes in the future, that it can accommodate such.
And we represented those by what we're calling hero steles. And they're essentially one to represent each national hero, and it would just show an image of that national hero as well as a description of who that national hero was. So again, it now takes the monument to another level. So it's not only something that you kind of move by and just see from afar, but you can now go inside to the monument, inside within the square, and you can take a look at the different national heroes and see what their impact, what their influence was in our Barbadian history. And we thought that was important because, again, the square, because of the name of the square, we thought it was important that they should be highlighted and be part of this monument as well.
So it basically gives that permanent feature for our national heroes. I think when National Heroes Day was first constituted, those of us who are old enough to remember is they would have put the photographs of the national hero up on the Treasury building, or the Treasury building as it was then. Obviously, those photographs weren't going to last forever, and I think as time has gone by, we haven't been seeing those, right? But there has been a clamor for some time for a home or some sort of representation of what those national heroes would need to look like. So that's what we've also, as Hugh would have mentioned, sought to do within this space, is to give that sense of permanence, that representation, right down to the latest national hero who was named last year when we became a republic. So all of them are represented in the square with a description of who they are.
So all national heroes would have then emanated from that Barbadian family.
And then the middle is the sculpture of the family unit. And this has several members, because a family is not just a mother, father, and child. A family in the Barbadian context could be an aunt, a grandmother, because again, in the Barbadian context, different families are constituted in different ways. So after the Panama experience, you had a whole period of time when it was a mother, probably an aunt, a grandmother that raised the children when the males went off to work. So that's why you have such a, women having a strong influence in the Barbadian family. So we've tried to, again, take all of that into account when we thought of what the Barbadian family is and what it possibly could be perceived to be in the future.
We created different elements in it that you could start to identify maybe different types of members of a family. So you may have parents, you may have forms that might resemble grandparents or children. It could represent aunties, cousins, other members of the extended family. And the whole point, again, is we use the fairly clean, almost faceless, abstract form. And the point there is the Barbadian family has evolved over centuries. Each Barbadian family now is represented by different family members. It looks different. By having a neutral canvas that you go there and you see, you can then, as an individual, you can imprint your own idea of what a Barbadian family, what your own family is. You can start to see your own parents, your siblings, your grandparents, or whoever. You then have the opportunity to imprint yourself into the monument itself. So that was the major idea behind the form and the design of the family sculpture in the middle.
And we wanted to be also fair to all of the different races, cultures, and persons that make up what a Barbadian family is. Barbados has been inhabited by several types of people. And as we evolve as a nation, we have other types or other races of people coming to live with us. So initially, yes, it was the white English settlers and the black African slaves. Obviously, they would have found Amerindian, or there were Amerindian people here before. As we have evolved as a culture, we've seen the Indo-Barbadian and the Sino-Barbadian cultures coming into play. So again, by having these sculptures of the family being nondescript, as Hugh said, when persons look at this, they don't feel alienated, because in looking at these nondescript figurines, it could be any race, any culture, but still Barbadian. So that was very important. We thought that needed also to come through. Yeah.
1 year ago, he spoke with us about his design of Golden Square Freedom Park. Well, he's back again. This time he's displaying his creativity and what he could possibly do in National Hero Square.
So we saw the call from government for a design competition to celebrate the Barbadian family as a true national hero. And I thought about it, and things that came to mind that we used for the inspiration to move forward was the idea of a flower as an enduring natural element that sheds. It's strong, it's fragile, it's critical to the life of the flower and the plant, and ultimately the world. So I used that as the shape and form to start the idea. And then in the same breath, I was also thinking about the fact that all of our people in Barbados came by sea as an element, and the repeated image of the slave ship was kind of a very emotive graphic that, you know, whenever you look at it, it really gives you a good jar. And I thought, you know, that image is how the majority of Barbadians arrived here. I wanted to put the two together. So then I started to create the idea of the flower and the petals radiating out from the flower. And I wanted the space to receive people as a three-dimensional experience. So at the center, so you'll see the imaging from the flower with the petals rolling back. You'll see the image of the people lying in the slave ship. And we kind of move into this abstraction of a flower. And where it ended up is that at the center of the sculpture, there is a polished stainless steel orb, which is basically the abstraction of the stamen of the flower. And that is held in position by these large curving and arcing brass elements. And the idea for that central piece is that when Barbadians visit the space and get integrated into the sculpture, what they would ultimately see in first glance and as the center of the structure is themselves. So I've been working with that idea of reflection over a period of years. So it's something that it's not just came up in this project, but you know, always seems interesting to me that you know, these types of sculptures, one of the most interesting ones are the ones I see where people can see themselves. And if you think about the Barbadian family and people visiting it for its, you know, artistic appeal and interest, but then at the end of the day, the main feature is to look at your own face. I find that as a nice play. So then from that central element, the design rolls out with bronze leaves. The petals are these leaf-shaped elements that fold back as you go out of the center of the circle and move out. They're about 5 foot and a bit tall, so they're almost life-size, but not quite life-size. But you have to walk around them, you'd have to look at them. What we've imagined for these petals, that is where the iconography of the family would be able to be incorporated in a more traditional graphic means in a bronze inlay and three-dimensional outlay. The other flexible component that we wanted to present in that idea is that I know this project might have a bit of controversy going forward and everybody might not be able to satisfy themselves with what's here, but we thought the fact that we actually have 12 petals, double-sided on 8 of them, so that's 20 faces, is that we could incorporate not only the artistic interpretation of the family that we would like to work on, but also the 10 national heroes could be quite easily incorporated into those petals as people move out of the space. And then the last element that is part of that composition is the abstraction of the people lying in the slave ship in the paving, where we've abstracted that into a more voluminous shape to introduce the idea of peoples. And the reason we abstracted it into more voluminous shape is we do want to depart from the terrible history of slavery and represent us being together in a more joyous way. And I found the voluminous shape that we created is a little more happy and kind of looking forward, and that was the idea for that paving detail. And it would require the use of a very sustainable, in terms of strong materials, so we're probably looking at like white and black granite, so that we can really maintain that detail in the paving. So you can see how it fits into Hero Square. It is just off of Nelson to the east a bit. So it sits in a space that would have to get reimagined. And part of what we are suggesting is the introduction of a very aggressive grid and copse of trees, because in Barbados, these environments are all good in the open, but if you really want to visit it in the day, maturing trees might be a nice element so that you could be in the shade, maybe not in the short term, but if it was built, 5 to 7 years down the road, and the right pruning of the trees, they could be lifted and you could have a nice shady cover. And these are just different views where you can see the orb in the center with the arcing bronze elements and the people kind of inside the space looking at themselves, and as they walk back out of the space, you're seeing the petals, which are vertical elements and have the sculptural 3D interpretations in them. So that's the essence of the design as we have it at this point in time, and we're looking forward to a favorable response for the judges.
Kevin Talma and his monument to the Barbadian family. The third team is made up of Dr. Sheena Weeks, Jamal Weeks, and Israel Mapp.
Essentially, is the idea of multi-generational support. We acknowledge that family is just not in the present, but it comes from the past and the possibility of the future. And we wanted to represent all of those spaces at the same time. We want to show support. We want to show inclusivity. We wanted to acknowledge that families are diverse in their composition. And what we came up with, or what Sheena translated that into, were essentially 6 figures.
For my part, it was more translating their core idea and kind of adding my own ideas of composition and how it should be represented. What I really enjoyed about their concept was the idea of using multiple figures to represent the Barbadian family. As somebody who would have experienced, I was coming off of the COVID experience, I know a lot of people would have lost their jobs. I lost my job as well during that time. And one of the areas where I felt support was my mother. So my mother really supported me through that time. And the idea of a monument that could kind of capture that you can almost lean back into your relatives, that you're supported, you're pushed forward. So in areas where I lack, my family was able to fill in a gap, and I hope to be able to provide that kind of support for my child going forward as well. So the monument, I wanted it to be able to capture that kind of essence. The composition of it was kind of personal to me in terms of representing that.
It is a representation of us and what we have done and what we can do. And I think that speaks volumes, because I want that when it's all said and done, as a nation, we look at how else can we reshape the narrative that is Barbados, so that we've done it already through becoming a republic, right? So what's the next step? It's looking at how do we reshape our image? How do we form an image of ourselves that has more to do with who we are as opposed to who we've been told we are?
I want Barbados to see itself. I want Barbadians to see themselves reflected in the monument. I want it to be that this is us. This is our representation. I'm not necessarily as interested in what it represents to visitors because I believe that is an indigenous monument. I want to reflect Barbados first, and what visitors take from it, that's up to them. But my focus would be representing the Barbadian public. The Barbadian public is very diverse. It may not seem so like on paper, like looking at census records, but it's very diverse in terms of ideas, in terms of religions, in terms of approaches to things. And I would hope that we can go back to a very basic representation of everybody coming out of a family.
Now, Reunion is made up of about 6 different figures. Each figure represents a different part of the Barbadian experience throughout the years. So we have represented periods from the 1930s, a figure that represents the period of enslavement, period of emancipation. We have the different moments within our society where we would have seen a big boom, for example, in education and in the growth of the nation and so on. And we also have more conceptual ideas represented. So we have a pregnant mother lifting a child towards the sky. Now, she represents the recent past, and the child represents the present and future. And also what is beautiful is that she is pregnant, as I said. So we have then this idea of a real blooming and blossoming future coming up, something that is unknown to all, but yet still she is very much ready to give birth to something new. Reunion is packed with a lot of meaning. So essentially it represents an intergenerational or multi-generational Barbadian family of various walks of life, class, culture, creed, everything. And each of them is pushing the person ahead of them to the next level. So you see them literally rising up out of the ground and pushing someone else up. And for me, one thing that I really take from it, and one thing that I hope Barbadians would see, is the idea that the efforts of those that have gone before us, those efforts have carried us through difficult times so that we can push the next generation forward. And the lovely thing about Reunion is that we have then this beautifully powerful and strong female form. She is pregnant with the future, and she is lifting a child above her head. Because for me, it represents the idea of we are all coming up out of the ground, coming up out of our past, coming up out of different circumstances, and we're lifting the future towards the sky.
And it represents kind of our core value, the idea of many hands make light work, the idea of like how me and Motley would say, we all in this together. When we are down, we're down together. When we're up together. So the idea of Barbadian unity, even in difference, because the figures are different sizes, different age groups represented. And even in that difference, they have a united goal. They're trying to push forward to make a brighter future for the youth. So that's the idea that I want represented. That is the legacy I hope the monument would leave.
And it also kind of points to this proverb that I remember hearing. I can't tell you where it comes from, but it is basically that we stand on the shoulders of giants. And that's exactly for me what Reunion is. And that's exactly what the Barbadian experience has been. We stand on the achievements of those persons from our past.
I'm inspired. Well, tomorrow, Friday, November the 25th, we will be told the official results, and we will be presented with the design which will fill this space, National Hero Square. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. This has been Monuments.